Andreas Krieg, Associate Professor at King's College London School of Security Studies. Andreas, we've spoken many times before, but never in person, and it is a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
We want your assessment. I'm going to be very unoriginal and ask you a question I've asked so many times in the last few days, but we want your assessment on where we are between the U.S. and Iran. They've had a first round of talks, whether direct or indirect is still somewhat confusing, but anyway, messages were shared in Oman. And we expect, based on what both sides have said, that there's going to be a second round. Ahead of that, Ali Larijani, the head of the National Security Council, also headed to Oman, so delivering some messages. Your reading of where we are in these negotiations?
I think we're pivoting closer to a deal than we were a couple of weeks ago. So, I mean, obviously, there's still a high risk of there being a military strike. The Armada, as Trump calls it, is still in the area. So we still have that coercion going against the regime by the Americans, which sets the context in which this is all taking place. But it seems to be fruitful in the way that the pressure works. And the Iranians have made concessions to discuss the nuclear deal. I think that is a positive. All the messaging from the mediators, from the Gulf countries, from Qatar, from Oman, from everyone involved, including from the Americans, has been very positive. The negotiators, Witkoff and Kushner, have looked at the talks last week in Oman as very positive. And the Iranians themselves, feedback was positive. I think the problem that we have right now is how do you translate this momentum on a strategic sort of framework into the nitty-gritty of the details, because that's where the devil is, right? The devil's in the detail of an actual nuclear deal. And the other...
So you say nuclear deal. There was one 11 years ago, signed in 2015 with this terrible name of JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
Yes.
And the basis of it was that Iran would limit its nuclear enrichment in exchange for lifting economic sanctions that had been crippling Iran's economy. That's the general framework.
Yeah.
Are we talking about something like this again?
Most likely. I think so what's on the table at the moment, because obviously the Israelis and more neoconservative hardliners want to go further than that. They want to have missile sanctions and restrictions on ballistic missile use. They want to have some restrictions on proliferation to the axis of resistance. But essentially what is being discussed in the first step right now is a JCPOA 2.0. It's about limiting enrichment, making sure that there are inspections in place on the ground in Iran, and the Iranians are not countering that. I mean, they're not against that. They are actually in favor of some sort of deal if it comes, in fact, in exchange for lifting of sanctions. The problem here is...
Donald Trump had pulled out of that deal. He said, I'm pretty sure those were his direct words, that it was a terrible deal, worst deal ever signed by the United States.
But if his name is on it, it's a positive deal. So he's trying to translate this into his own deal. So what the Iranians are offering, the U.S. administration is saying, you can have a deal. That's what the Gulf states are saying. You can have the Trump deal, and he can sell it as the greatest deal in history with the Iranians. I think it's a lot about this is optics rather than anything tangible.
Well, even if we say Trump is very concerned with optics, then let's look at the optics from the American point of view. Trump had said himself, it was a terrible deal. Why? Because it didn't curb Iran's missile threat, missile program. That's to say roughly the number of ballistic missiles that Iran has and can fire at any given time. That was his number one criticism of the deal. And number two, it does nothing to curb Iran's ties and influence over armed groups in the region, so Iran's regional activity. Those two things, once again, Iran is saying are off the table.
Well, they're saying it's off the table, but obviously the way that the Gulf states, Qatar and Oman are looking at in particular, is this is a gradual deal. You agree on the nuclear issue, you build trust first, but there's no trust between the parties. If you can agree on the nuclear issue, then you can have further agreements down the line. I think we have to be realistic here. Number one, the Iranians will not give up their ballistic missile system. They will also cannot really say that they will stop funding what is called the axis of resistance. But what you can do is you can put something on paper in terms of a security guarantee where the Iranians are saying we're no longer attacking U.S. bases, where they're saying we're no longer attacking the Gulf states, where we will try to curb the number of ballistic missiles, but obviously not giving it up. Something that looks like a win for Trump. And that's what it comes down to. But we're very far away from this. I think it's one step at a time.
That took years, by the way, to get to that. Years of negotiation.
Absolutely. But I think the Omanis have experience with that. They have been negotiating the previous deal. I think we can get to a nuclear deal, and then we have to take it step by step.
Andreas Krieg, great to have you in the studio. Thank you very much.